All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Dr. Carling Sitterly. I've been with Lap of Love now for more than 5 years, helping families with hospice and end of life care. Oh, hello from New York. And today we're going to be talking about a pretty tough topic, um, deciding when to say goodbye to our beloved pets, not just for ourselves, but how do we decide as a family? When there's more than one person, more than a lot more emotions and opinions in a time like this, it can be difficult for one person, but it certainly is even more difficult sometimes when we're deciding as a family. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I first want to point you to our video with Dr. Mary Gardner. She talks a lot about the aspects of what go into a decision like this of knowing when to say goodbye. And I don't want to repeat all of the great information that she has there. And so I'm gonna we're gonna have a link in the chat there to her video. So if you want to check that out after this or pause this and come back to this after viewing that video, that might be helpful. But again, I want to just focus on when we have more than one opinion, trying to make the best decisions for our loved one, our beloved fur baby or feather baby or scaly baby. And when we're deciding as a family, I want you all to start by acknowledging that all of you love your pet. Sometimes we can forget that because our expressions of love are different. Sometimes we can kind of make up some interpretations of those differing expressions thinking that, well, we are closer to our pet, and so I know best, or thinking the other, like our partner or our other family member, is just being selfish in what they're wanting to do in this moment. And that's just not the case. I just want you to know that in the more than 5 years I've been helping families with end of life decisions for their beloved pets, I have yet to find anyone who doesn't love their pet as much as the next person, with families, between families. And I also want you to know that everyone that I meet only wants what's best for their pet. It just, what that looks like sometimes differs a little bit. So we need to be able to talk about that. But before we even get to that point, I want you all to acknowledge that you all love your pet equally and you all are just trying to decide what's best. And so sometimes that can help open us up to hearing our partners or our other family members' perspectives a little bit more easily so that you really can decide what's best for your pet. Next, I just want you to know that you don't have to agree on every single detail. You don't have to agree that whatever is decided is the absolute best option that you think. But what you do need to be able to do is get to a point where you're all willing to move forward with the decision at hand. So is that you're deciding to continue hospice care, or you're going to go back and do a few more diagnostics, or today is the day to say goodbye. Maybe you would ideally like to wait another week, but it's also important for your all of your family members to be present. So whether that's a kid that's away at college that needs to come back. So just knowing that you don't have to agree on every single aspect, every single detail can sometimes take the pressure off some of these discussions too. Next, I want to talk to you about quality of life. Quality of life is a subjective measure. So it can, 5 people can assess one pet in the same moment and come up with 5 different scores. Still, there are tools to help us kind of figure out what quality of life our pet has. And those tools will also be in the links are in the chat. Links to those will be in the chat. Excuse me. And so when we're deciding as a family, what I want you to do is first pick a tool that you think works best. Sometimes that can be as simple as just marking on a calendar whether there's a good day or a bad day, and but figure out for yourself what your answer to the quality of life assessment for your pet in that moment, and then come together as a family to discuss it, because we're going to see different things. Maybe you get up early and you see your pet struggling to like stretch out those achy joints in the morning, but when your partner comes home in the evenings, maybe your pet is really excited to see them, and so you guys are seeing your pet at different times of day, and that quality of life looks differently depending on when you do see your pet. So being able to assess quality of life separately and then come together as a family can be really helpful, and then talk about why you differ on some of those assessments, whether if one person thinks today's a really great day and one person thinks it's not so good, like why did you come to that conclusion, and hear each other out. Another thing that can be really helpful is to take videos and take pictures of some of the things you're seeing, so that you can show your partner or family member why you think your pet is struggling so much, because they may not be able to see it. I also want to talk to you about the finite resources that we have. We actually categorize them and call them budgets, the four budgets, and those are finances, time, emotional, and physical budgets. Now, as a family, you might think, well, we just have one pot of money that we're all sharing, so why do we have to care about that? But I also want you to know that everyone has different values, different beliefs when it comes to money. And sometimes those show up when making tough decisions for our pets. And so being able to acknowledge where we differ for that may help guide our conversations. Also, knowing that we each have different amounts of time to devote to caregiving tasks for our pets. And if one person has more time, maybe more of the responsibility falls on them. Maybe acknowledging that, and really seeing where each of you is coming from when it comes to that. The other budget is emotional. This is probably the toughest one, and the one where I think people have trouble understanding their partner at first until they really understand. And so when our emotional capacity, so emotional budget is the energy and emotional capacity we have to get through a certain situation. And so when that is up, what that looks like is something called caregiver burden. And it's when we're just really exhausted at seeing our beloved pet struggling to get up every day, or just sitting through the night panting all the time. That may be really hard for us to be able to handle emotionally. And so that when we get to that point, that's when our budget is up, and we need to be able to maybe tell our partner or our family members, look, I'm just emotionally exhausted. I can't do one more roller coaster ride of improvement and then another downturn in our pet's condition. And so maybe acknowledging that can be helpful in your conversations. And a little bit more about caregiver burden. There's a link there in the chat as well, uh, talking specifically about pet caregiver burden. And what caregiver burden is really the strain someone feels when caring for a loved one. And there are all sorts of emotions that come with that. And all of those emotions that you may be feeling, if you're experiencing that strain, is normal. And so hopefully you can find a little bit of support through that link, or just being able to talk about it. And if your partner is experiencing caregiver burden, maybe you can step in for some of those caregiving tasks, or maybe hearing them out of what they're really experiencing, and seeing that emotional budget being up can maybe help guide your conversations a little differently. Quality of death is also really important. I think almost as important as quality of life. And when we think of quality of death, it's something that we don't want to think about. It's when anticipatory grief comes up. So anticipatory grief, we have pet loss support groups specifically geared towards that anticipatory grief because we see it coming. We know we're going to be grieving here shortly. We love our beloved pet, and yet there's still all those kind of grieving emotions before we even say goodbye. And so I want you to be able to talk about that with your family members. And I also want you to acknowledge that there are certain expectations that we have, and I want you to articulate them first to yourself. Sometimes we don't even want to think about it, but it does matter. Maybe you want to say goodbye on a good day. Maybe you want to avoid an emergency situation. Being able to articulate that first to yourself to then be able to talk about that with your family can help guide some of the decisions so that you can make that as close to what you envision for your pet as possible. Because their passing, the quality of their passing does matter too. Our pets can unfortunately not live forever. Whatever their condition is slowly taking their life, but we can make some decisions to make that passing what we want it to be for them, and to have as few or no regrets as possible when it comes to actually the day we say goodbye. Another thing to think about is, do we really understand our pet's condition? Sometimes only one of the pet parents gets to talk to the veterinarian directly, whether that's because of COVID policies or just, again, that time budget. Only one person is able to go, uh, and and so then there's the little bit of telephone in terms of figuring out what is actually going on for our pets, and so how do we figure out more information? So first of all, we have some common cat and dog diseases, and those links will be in the chat there too. That might give you a little bit more information about your pet's condition. If your pet doesn't have a diagnosis, that's okay too. Either talking to your veterinarian, or if you don't have a relationship with one, we do have our tele-advice service, which is available to anyone, not just those in the areas that we service with Love Veterinarians. So even if you're outside one of our service areas, you can still access our tele-advice service. And so that's a 30-minute conversation that can help you figure out a little bit more about your pet's condition, where their quality of life is, have an expert help you with that quality of life assessment so you really understand exactly where your pet is in terms of their quality of life, and just where things are to help you make the best decision possible. So that's available too. And there's a link to um, our tele-advice service there. So you can figure out or find out a little bit more about that service that we have. Um, there's also other websites out there to help you navigate your pet's condition. I just advise you to be careful about what sites you see, because not every site is created equally. So a veterinarian clinic site, vet school sites, those are also really good resources for finding out more about your pet's condition, because when you have as many facts as possible, then you can make better decisions for your pet. So again, I just want to reiterate what I've covered here. It was a lot of information, but I want you to start your conversations as a family when thinking about when to say goodbye to your pet, acknowledging that you all love your pet equally and you all are really just trying to uh, figure out what's best. So that's where you're coming from. You all have good intentions when it comes to your pet. So start there. Know that you don't have to agree on every single detail, but you do have to agree to be willing to go forward with a particular decision. So whether that's to choose to go to the clinic or to say goodbye at home, or maybe altering a little bit. Maybe you wanted to say goodbye tomorrow, but today you're okay going forward. So figuring out that, having quality of life discussions, using the tools, taking videos, all of that's helpful. Understanding that there's four budgets of finances, time, emotional, and physical budget to help us, again, have these conversations about where we're at with our partners and with our family members. Know that caregiver burden is real. Quality of death matters too. And understand your pet's condition as much as you can. There are resources out there. And we also have our tele-advice service. So I'm going to be scrolling here through the chat. If there's any questions, please help us, or please feel free to ask through the chat. Yeah, that when it comes to quality of passing, one uh, pet parent may have had a really bad experience in the past, and so sometimes just talking to your veterinarian or asking questions of in our tele-advice service about what a euthanasia appointment might look like can help provide that reassurance to one of one of your family members, to know that it that quality of passing really is what you want it to be as much as possible. Some great comments here about how we've helped you. Just know that it's truly an honor for us to be able to help all of you. Oh, I'm so sorry about you losing Molly. I know that must have been really tough. And know that we have pet loss resources and support groups for after you lose your baby too. Yeah, the ups and downs are really tough. Not every day is a good day, not everyone's a bad day. And so that makes it really, really tough. Just for clarification, is there a question about how best to assess pain? We do have um, some resources about common signs for pain. That might be a good place for you to start. I'll make sure that gets in the chat. Maybe not this second, but I'll make sure that that gets added. We'll pass that on to Dr. Sunday. Okay, so even after knowing when you want to say goodbye, deciding what you want afterward, that can be some tough decisions. So whether cremation or burial, um, it's great to be thinking about that now, though, so that again you can make those arrangements not when you're feeling the biggest amount of emotion, but can maybe make some decisions with a slightly clearer head. That's a good question. So sometimes your state veterinary medical association has some funds, asking your vet clinic those questions. I know it's hard to admit when you're on a fixed income. We also have our angel fund. So when you call, ask about that. If you are in one of our areas where one of our Lab of Love veterinarians can come out to help you say goodbye. All right. Well, if you have more questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. And I really appreciated being here with you guys. All right. Take care.